mean, not that y'all need me to tell you this, but the never-ending roller coaster ride that is the Los Angeles Chargers football season continues on. You might as well just strap yourselves in and get ready for this to be the remainder of the season, because more likely than not, this is what we're going to be dealing with every week, with the exception of the bye. But it's the Chargers, so who knows? Could be some interesting news that pops up then too. Wouldn't put it past them. But anyway, I'm back with another 5-piece, so let's do that. Get the ball rolling with numero uno, man in the mirror. And this one's for you, Brandon Staley. Who do you want to be? Serious question. Last year, we assumed that we knew that he would be just kind of this wild card maverick, going forward on multiple fourth downs, taking risks, being a gambler, and trusting his quarterback to power them to victory, trusting the offense, not necessarily leaning on the defense. We figured out as time went on that was really about the fact that he couldn't actually trust the defense. At least that's kind of sort of what we're seeing this year, almost, but not really. I'll get to more on that in a second. But at this point, we should have a better idea of who Coach Staley is. And I can't say that we do, at least speaking for myself. It seems that we're getting a much more toned down version of him this season. A bit more on the conservative side. The fourth down attempts have gone down a bit, and they actually don't happen when you expect them to. Last year was just kind of like a gimme. If they were anywhere near midfield in plus territory or just before the 50, they may actually go for it. Hell, I mean, in some instances inside their own 20. But we don't need to go back there. The question is, how much improvement have we seen from Staley year over year? It's hard to say because I still haven't nailed down exactly who the guy is. I'm not super frustrated just yet, but I'm finding it harder and harder to justify some of the things that he does. Granted, I don't believe anything about him losing the locker room. I think he does have the respect of the team, but I am a bit curious as to whether or not some questions are being asked about some of the decisions that he makes. And again, that's all speculative. I don't know anything, but I could understand it. So hopefully as the season continues to wear on, we get a better feel for who the guy is. Ultimately, we all like him for the most part. Most of us do. And we understand that he has a football mind, and unlike many other. And a lot of the times, some of his justifications make sense, and others, they don't add up all that much. So just want some consistency from you, my man. Let's see what you do. We're rooting for you. I would rather not have to deal with another coach here in 2 years because, I mean, they're not going to fire him. You know, that's not the Charger way. But let's ride this one out, and hopefully it yields some dividends here because, it's like I keep saying to y'all, I don't want to have to keep being reminded about Brian Daboll. I'm going to leave it there. And that kind of transitions me into number 2 here. Identity crisis. Because the Chargers don't seem to have one. Walk with me here. Pass first team, right? Well, in order to have that sort of offense, you would probably need various types of offensive weapons to distribute the ball to, particularly at the wide receiver position. Having multiple running backs definitely comes in handy. If you can have 1 or 2 satellite backs, dudes that can take the ball in the backfield on regulatory handoffs and get out in the routes, perfect. But what you also want to have is a variety at wide receiver. You want to have your 50-50 ball guys. You want to have your prolific route runners. You want to have someone who can take the top off. You want to have someone who can create, just, you know, a mixture of wide receivers. You don't want to have similar skill sets across the board, because in the event that one goes down, i.e. Keenan Allen, you have less options, but the ones that you do have do a lot of the same things, which make them very, let's be frankly honest, super easy to defend, especially when you don't have a lot of spacing. And that's an issue for the Chargers that you've seen now for a few games, and I hope they get that figured out because, again, really doesn't do you much good to have 2 or 3 dudes all in the same area who aren't all that good with run after the catch, aren't super explosive, and just don't make a whole lot happen with the ball in their hands unless there's a ton of space in front of them. So, if you're going to utilize this type of offense, which is based in the Saints playbook, it's kind of got that skeleton built in. One of the things that made the Saints offense prolific was the balance associated with it, and also the various types of wide receivers. Drew Brees didn't have to be the guy every week. You can't necessarily say that about Justin Herbert. When the running game works, it's great, except it's not consistent, and of course, they won't really commit to it. There are other factors there. I'm not blind to that. You've got injuries up and down the offensive line. All that plays a part. But again, you have to consider this. If this is the style of offense you're going to run, you have to have the pieces to make it go. Because of all the injuries on the offensive line, the Chargers are going to have to, and we saw that last week versus the Broncos, run a bunch of quick game stuff because you can't drop Herbert back 5-7 steps and expect anything to open up downfield. Number one, you don't have the speed to get there quick enough. And number two, the offensive line is not going to hold up in spots, especially if you're, down your center, who is arguably the second most important piece in your offense. Probably not going to go all that well for you. But by the same token, you don't have any creators at wide receiver. So these tunnel screens, the stuff even to Eckler out of the backfield, it works on occasion, but when you go to that well one too many times, you're asking for trouble. So again, at some point, this team has to establish who they are. Ideally, you want to be able to do that with your full cast of characters, but if you can't, then you need to be able to find a way to do things differently. You're handcuffed when you don't have the proper personnel to be able to maneuver in that way. So we may get an answer to this question as the season progresses and guys come back, and then maybe they can be a little bit more balanced between run and pass. But for the time being, they don't know who they are, neither do we. And while we're on the topic of wide receivers, might as well just get straight to it. Number 3, where's Magic Mike? $20 million man. You can't go missing for entire games. I'm going to shoot Mike some bail. Before that matchup against the Broncos, who didn't know that Patrick Surtain was going to lock him up? Practically everyone. That's a rhetorical question. So let's just get into the meat and potatoes of it. We all know what Mike Williams is. He's a really good contested catch guy. Doesn't use his hands all that well, but he makes some ridiculous grabs in key moments. Does that outweigh the fact that he goes Where's Waldo for multiple games in any given season? It's always awesome to watch him blow up on the road when he goes out for a couple of those campaigns where it's like a 7-8 catch night, 120, 130 yards, maybe a tud or two. All that looks great when it happens. But then when it's followed up with performances like we saw versus the Broncos, where he is practically in the feds because Patrick Surtain is having none of that with him, then you start questioning about, what is this guy really? I've made no bones about it. I don't believe Mike Williams to be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL because things like this don't happen consistently to top 5 guys. It just doesn't. That's not my opinion. The skill set is what it is. It serves a purpose. But if you don't have something opposite of him that is a varying skill set and he becomes your number 1 guy, then unless you're playing a team that basically has a destitute secondary, the results probably won't be all that great. And I don't fault Mike for being who he is. He is exactly who he's always been. He was the same guy in Clemson. When you're bigger and stronger than most of your competition, you can get away with a lot. When you're in NFL and you're going against cornerbacks who are 6'2", 6'3", with better short area quickness than you, so they can defend you against those slant routes. And because you're a bit heavy footed, you're not able to get position and box them out and use your body in that way. You can't get deep on them because you don't have that type of speed. Your job is that much harder. And I feel bad for the dude sometimes because the expectations are high. But hey, when you're a number 7 overall pick in the draft, you got to deal with what comes with it. But some of this isn't his fault, by the way. I'll get to that in a bit. But Mike, look, man, I don't doubt that you're out there playing your behind off, but something's got to shake. We need more of you. Keenan may be back this week. If he's not, I wouldn't be shocked. It's the last game before the bye. Giving him those extra, essentially 2 weeks to fully recover from that hamstring situation wouldn't be a bad idea. But all depends on how confident the Chargers are that they can pull this one off against the Hawks at home. We shall see. On to the next. I think I'm going to call number 4 Survivor Series. So listen to this. Most of you know this list by heart. You're down your all-pro left tackle. Your all-pro center has been out for multiple games. Your right tackle's playing on a sprained MCL. Your number 1 wide receiver has been out since the second quarter of week 1. Your tight end 2, who should be a real threat in the receiving game, has been practically non-existent with a hamstring injury that has lingered longer than, well, I'm not going to say that because it's disrespectful, but it's been a while. And he actually might have been concussed versus the Broncos, so there's a chance he may miss more time. The only real deep speed threat you had, you lost. Your incumbent wide receiver 3 is beat up and possibly concussed. Your underutilized RB2 is now out with a bum knee. Your $16.5 million lockdown cornerback can't get right. The face of your franchise, last but definitely not least, has tender ribs. And I'm not talking about the kind you smoke and sauce up. All that said, the team is 4-2 through all of this, and it's not been pretty. So we got to give props where they're deserved. It has not been easy, and it has not looked the greatest. Putting all these things in context, whenever you're going to critique the team, keep saying this, you want to laud the good and be critical of the bad. But again, macro versus micro. You keep all these things in your mind when you're making these decisions about, when you're gathering your thoughts and coming up with your own opinions about these things, because it all matters. Even through all the adversity that the Chargers are facing, they're still tied in the division with the Kansas City Chiefs. The question now comes in the fact that the trade deadline is on the horizon, and we know that typically the Chargers don't really make any really big moves, but I wonder if this offseason was an indication of a changing of the guard. Could they? Yeah, maybe. I mean, when you're looking at the cap situation going into 23, it might make things a little bit difficult. What they have on the books currently, you could have to possibly maneuver to make some things work out. But look, I've seen some wild stuff happen with teams across the league, particularly the New Orleans Saints. The Kansas City Chiefs play cap gymnastics all the time. Ed McGuire is a genius, and I feel like whatever they can do to make this work numbers wise, they can. Not saying that I know for certain that they're going to go out and add anything offensively, but if they want to get the most out of Herbert and they want to kind of keep this train rolling and help him, then it's probably in their best interest to maybe lean in that direction. But again, even if they don't make the moves, which I hope they do, for the time being right now, going into week 7, they're still a 4-2 team. And if you can get into the bye and survive and get into the bye at 5-2, that's saying a whole lot about this team's ability to persevere. Be proud about that. Forget the fact that they basically come this close to giving us all heart attacks on a weekly basis. Put that aside for a second. We like to all air our grievances out in regards to that. But for the time being, just appreciate what's in front of you. But again, if this team is serious about making some noise, they're probably going to have to make a move or two. Whether or not they do it, I'm not betting anything on it. I'm not a betting man anyway, but we kind of all know how that typically works out. We'll see though. It could happen. Capping this thing off with number 5, Sleepless Joe, Mr. Lombardi. You know, I've come for your neck a few times, man, with good reason. There have been some situations where you've showed yourself to be adequate, above average play caller in some respects. Now, some of that has to do with the competition you're facing, but I like some of your play calling. I think that you have a tendency to brain fart on occasion and throw the entire offense out of whack and off schedule and out of rhythm, but that's a conversation for another day. Let's stick to the topic here. I need you up all night. Get as much Starbucks coffee. What's the place that Staley gets his coffee from? Over there? Whatever it is. Borrow his espresso machine from his office. Whatever. I don't care. Dog. Spend this week going through OC, for Dummies books. Or call up Sean Payton. Spend a week at his crib. Talk it through. I need you to figure out how to get this offense through this week shorthanded. It's asking for a lot because we don't know who's going to be available. If Keenan's there, then great. I still don't know how I feel about Keenan playing this week. I don't know. Honestly, I think I feel better about him taking additional time off. But let's kind of venture back into the past when I was discussing the whole Mike Williams thing earlier in the 5. When I said that it's not all his fault, a lot of this is on you, Joe. You know who the man is. You know that as far as being a nuanced route runner, it's not something that's a part of his skill set. You know that he's not a speed guy. You know what his strengths are. You want to know the best way to utilize a player like that has a limited skill set, is you have to scheme him open. You got to get Mike on the move. You have to get him in situations where maybe you line up in trips formations and you run some levels concepts. Find ways to get him across the field. Now, again, I understand when we're talking offensive line, there's only but so much time to get that ball off with the protection as it's currently constituted. And, I'm assuming Lindsley's probably back this week. Apparently, he had the bubble guts last week. Hopefully, that's all taken care of and get the man some Pepto or something. I don't know, whatever. You have to do a better job at scheming Mike Williams open, because what we can't have this week is a 5th round rookie, albeit an athletic freak at 6'4", 205 pounds that can run mid 4.2s, low 4.2s. What is it? Tariq Woolen, whatever you run, it ain't normal for someone your size, and he hasn't played the cornerback position very long now. Patrick Surtain, I can forgive. P. Twice might be right now a top 3 cornerback in the NFL. I can understand that. But a guy who's barely played the position is super raw, albeit performing very well, should not be able to take your $20 million wide receiver out of a game. Just shouldn't happen. Now, from an athletic standpoint, height, weight, and speed, yeah, he can run with Mike easy. He can defend him from a height perspective. 50-50 balls might not really be that much of a thing. And we know creating separation as a natural route runner ain't going to be an option this week either. But go with me here for a second. Just an idea that I'm having. And I'm not an offensive coordinator. I say this all the time. I don't play one on YouTube. But what I will say to you is, have an idea. Just a thought. Since we're talking about ways to scheme Mike Williams open, Craig, why don't you kind of put your money where your mouth is and provide us an example? Well, sure. Absolutely. Think about it this way. Let's say I don't know, an easy way to steal 6 points, like inside the 20, because we know that the Chargers aren't necessarily the best in the red zone. The efficiency isn't all that high when we're talking about touchdowns as opposed to field goals. I'm actually a little miffed at the fact that Lombardi hasn't done this just yet. But imagine this, if you will. Let's say you can actually run this under center or out of shotgun. Let's say like a Y split with trips opposite the boundary, Everett, like ISO to the boundary. So he and Williams like actually switch sides, and Williams is acting as the Y, and you got your slot and your Z on the same side as Williams. Let's say like you run slants from the slot and the Z, and that creates a natural pick for Williams as he runs a wheel underneath them towards the sideline, towards the field, opposite the boundary, of course, as I said. Those natural picks create the separation Mike would need to catch a ball from Herbert, whether Herbert wants to put it on a line and give him an opportunity to run, or whether Herbert wants to kind of aim it towards a pylon and let Mike try to get under it and use his size, and maybe get a step on a faster cornerback who has to take a severe angle to attempt to cut that off, or gets caught up in that pick action and Mike might have a wide open touchdown. Just simple stuff like that. That doesn't take a whole lot to come up with. I mean, I literally just thinking some stuff through and it popped up off the top of my head. I'm like, okay, well, why haven't we seen more of that? Just a bit more creativity from an offensive coordinator who's worked with a brilliant offensive mind in Sean Payton. And I just find it very difficult to understand why we don't see more of this, especially when you're down to your wide receiver 2 now being your wide receiver 1, and all the options behind it aren't necessarily all that reliable. You have to get more creative. So, look, Joe, do what you gotta do, man. Tell the wife you need a few nights. Work's calling, and she likes buying all this nice stuff, and you like providing it for her. You want to keep this gig, and you gonna have to burn the midnight oil a little bit. I'm sure she'll understand. I mean, she's been doing it for years. So, let's lock it up, man. Let's get this done. Get a dub. Head into the bye feeling good at 5-2, and let's see where things go from there. Start getting some guys back healthy, and have some fun, and not have so many close games, and definitely not another one like the one we all just witnessed, because oh my God. But anyway, regardless of what happens on Sunday, I will be back per usual. Another 5 of them things, hot and spicy, straight out the air fryer. So we try to keep it healthy. But until then, catch y'all on the next one. Take it easy. It's been me, you. I appreciate you. Gone.